Every year, tens of millions of people commute on the Queensland Rail suburban network, going from one station to another, with most people taking this expansive public works project for granted. But beneath the modern railways and bustling platforms, there's a forgotten chapter in Brisbane transport history. Disused train station that once played a vital role in connecting communities. As the railway system evolved over time, expanding to meet demands of the growing city, some stations were forgotten about as relics of a bygone era. These silent remnants offer a time capsule into the past, showcasing an interesting glimpse into the Brisbane from back then. In this episode, I will be exploring Brisbane's ghost stations. But what makes a station a ghost station specifically? Well, I've devised 3 criteria. 1, the station must be abandoned, obviously. 2, the station must be between 2 other stations that are served by Queensland Rail. So, main station to my right passes as it's between Bowen Hills and Albion, while Cobble Station on the Daybro branch gets disqualified because there's no station north that's served by Queensland Rail. And 3, there must be something left. So, main station gets disqualified because there's nothing there and it's not really interesting, and so are all of these stations. So with that said, let's get into it. Nestled between Rockley and Salisbury Station is this, Nyanda Station. In 1885, it opened as Nyanda Crossing as one of the original stations on the Beenleigh line. It quickly became the de facto station for workers employed at the Even, Deacon and Company when the workshops opened here, adjacent to the station. You can actually see a spur line behind me there going to the workshops, which is currently not in use. In 1951, it was renamed from Nyanda Crossing to just Nyanda. In 1975, the construction of the Boggo Junction Road overpass above me was started, presumably to alleviate traffic from the level crossing just over there. In this aerial imagery from 1975, you can see the overpass starting to be constructed, and ironically, a bunch of congestion on the old road due to a passing train. On a modern map, the old road south of the level crossing and the overpass itself are both known as Boggo Junction Road. During the late 70s, most stations south of the Brisbane River were steadily being lengthened to accommodate for the SX set carriages and the new at the time EMU carriages, but Nyanda had no room to expand. On the east side was Boggo Junction Road, while on the west side was the previously mentioned rail spur to Deakin workshops. As a result of this, the station closed down in 1978 when the Maryvale Bridge was opened. It was also possible that another factor for the closure was the fact that the station was located less than 600 metres from both Rockley and Salisbury stations, which I still find bizarre. So for reference, that's the Nyanda station right there, and then that's Rockley. So they're actually really close. And another thing is, though, the actual Nyanda station, it looks very dystopian, like one of those, stations in LA that's under a highway. It just kind of looks like one of those. I don't like it. It's quite weird.
I am standing on Gloucester Street, and behind me are the remains of Gloucester Street Station. The station was opened in 1891 with the extension of the line from Boggo Junction Station through to Melbourne Street Station with a double section of track to serve the common surroundings and to replace the old line through Wooloongabba. In 1925, the construction of the Brisbane-Kyoga line commenced, requiring a standard gauge connection, as in New South Wales they use standard gauge, while here in Queensland we use narrow gauge. A tunnel was constructed to accommodate for this third track, which you can see just behind me there. The Brisbane-Kyoga line opened in September of 1930. Just like the Nyanda station before it, there was no space to lengthen the platform between the bridges that carry Gloucester Street and the tunnels just up ahead for the new SX set carriages and EMUs, as it was deemed too expensive to rebuild the bridge or tunnel, and due to Vulture Street station being located only 600 metres away, it was decided to close the station instead of lengthening it. In 1978, Gloucester Street station was closed with the opening of the Maryvale Bridge.
Welcome to Tennyson Station. Originally opened as soft stone pocket railway siding in 1884, it was later renamed Tennyson in 1887 and is dedicated on its own rail corridor between Corinda and Yeerongpilly. It's known as the Corinda to Yeerongpilly line, obviously, or more commonly as the Tennyson line. This line might have you a little bit confused as it's unique, unlike other lines. While all the other lines on the Brisbane suburban network are radial, meaning they originate at a point, the city centre in this case, and span outwards, the Tennyson line has an orbital arrangement connecting two lines together. The reason is quite simple. When the line was built in 1884, the Brisbane suburban network looked like this. Yes, that's it. The only rail corridor south of the CBD was what we now know as the Ipswich line, and the only rail bridge crossing the river was the Albert Bridge in Indooroopilly. So if you wanted to build a rail line serving Brisbane's southern suburbs, you had to start it south of the Albert Bridge. So when a rail line was needed to connect the coal mining town of Ipswich to serve the wharves along the Brisbane River, in Wooloongabba for refuelling and the exportation of coal, the Wooloongabba branch railway line, that's Wooloongabba spelled with one L, not two, unlike the suburb, was opened from South Brisbane Junction to Stanley Street Station on the 2nd of June of 1884. Less than a year later, in April of 1885, the start of the Beenleigh line was constructed to Loganlea, where both lines met at Boggo Junction. Over the years, the rail network on the south side changed a lot, but the Tennyson line remained an integral part of the network, as it connected the Ipswich and Beenleigh lines as well as being a major freight corridor. However, in 1978, the Maryvale Bridge would open between Roma Street and South Brisbane, finally connecting the Beenleigh line more directly to the city centre. No longer was the Tennyson line needed for a passenger service connection between the two lines, so it fell out of favour. The service was thinned out to just a shuttle service between Corinda and Yeerongpilly. The shuttle was suspended briefly on the 1st of June 1998 before resuming shortly after. Interestingly, the Tennyson shuttle used the silver bullet rail cars as rolling stock, and it would be the last line to do so before they were all retired in January of the year 2000, only to be replaced by the ICE? Yes, for a short time, the ICE, a train designed for long-distance travel, was used as the Tennyson shuttle, literally one of the shortest distances such a train could travel on the QR network. As the platform at Tennyson was so short, only the first carriage of the ICE would be used for passenger transfer. This absurdity would not last long, however, as on the 25th of May 2001, the Tennyson shuttle service was abolished and replaced by the 104 bus route. While services still ran on the line, they only did so in peak times. Even this would come to an end, as due to low patronage, on the 3rd of June 2011, a 6-car SMU left the station at 4 p.m. for Corinda as the last ever service on the Tennyson line. This is what remains today. Quite a lot, actually. The signage, shelters, payphones, CCTV cameras and other stuff were removed. However, as you can see, quite a bit remains. Oddly enough, for a station that was used not long ago, the second platform was very, very short, meaning only 3 train cars at a time can stop at the station. So, what will happen to this line in the future? Well, the line is utilised heavily by freight services with the Wooloongabba goods yard located on the line. It is also used during track closures to redirect services if other parts of the line are closed, and until very recently it's still being displayed on the Queensland Rail Network map until the latest version of the map came out. So it's safe to say that the Tennyson Rail Corridor is going nowhere. But how about passenger services on this line? I mean, unlike the previous 2 stations, this station has a bit going for it. First, it served the suburb of Tennyson, and it's an orbital route, unlike the radial routes on most of our network, which are great at funneling people into the city, but are terrible at getting people anywhere else. The Tennyson line, at least in part, is a solution to this issue as an orbital route. Plus, the 104 bus replacing the Tennyson shuttle is notoriously terrible. Robert Dow, the spokesperson for the public transport advocacy group Rail Back on Track, has always maintained that reopening the line would reduce car congestion better than the proposed $800 million to $1.3 billion duplication of the Walter Taylor car bridge. And it's not just transport enthusiasts, because there have actually been calls to reopen the line, like in 2021 when Councillor Nicol Johnson of Tennyson and the Greens MP Michael Berkman proposed to have the line reopened, citing benefits for the community and an increased demand due to the nearby Queensland Tennis Centre being used as a venue for the 2032 Olympics. Councillor Nicol Johnson was quoted as saying,
"The Tennyson spur line is a critical service. It seems short-sighted to me to close a rail line that can move people around the city."
Michael Berkman was quoted as saying,
"I think the time is right to kick off a conversation about reopening it. Reopening this line would create more cross-suburban links for all those residents."
And then Transport Minister Mark Bailey responded by saying that reopening the line would cause significant delays across the rest of the network and would not be worth it due to the low patronage. No. So can the line actually be reopened? Well, the short answer is no. The long answer is also no. Let's start with the smaller issue, the station itself. The station is located only a kilometre away from Yeerongpilly station and realistically only serves passengers west of the station, as in the east Yeerongpilly station does the job quite well already. For an example, let's say I live in one of the two high-rises in the suburb, which collectively make up around 50% of Tennyson's population of 1,109 people. Walking to Tennyson station takes 9 minutes, while walking to Yeerongpilly station takes, well, also 9 minutes. It's the same story for the tennis centre. The station only provides marginal benefits to low-density areas to the west of the station. Furthermore, as the station is not long enough, is too curvy and half demolished, it will need to be rebuilt in a different location on a straighter alignment of track. This cannot be done west of the station, as there is simply no room, so it'll have to be constructed east of the station, as Robert Dow suggested, due to the location providing a straighter alignment and space for amenities like park and rides and space for a car park. While this station relocation would provide better access to the tennis centre and the apartment blocks, it would be costly and be more inconvenient for the residents that live in West Tennyson, which were the residents that really needed the public transport in the first place. So this is what Mark Bailey meant when he said the station would have low patronage. It will have to be relocated in an awkward spot that is already decently served by Yeerongpilly station. But in the future, the area will most likely be redeveloped, as evidenced by the high-rises shown earlier, and will be a good investment for when the area becomes more densely populated. Setting aside the questionable benefits that the station will provide, the real benefits will come from the cross-connectivity the Tennyson line would provide between the Ipswich and Beenleigh lines, which will dwarf any benefits that the station itself could ever deliver. Which leads me on to the second and bigger issue of the line, and why it will most likely never be opening anytime soon. The problem lies here, on the rail corridor directly east of Tennyson Station. Specifically, this 3-track section between Park Road and Coopers Plains, which is served by the Gold Coast and Beenleigh lines, with the Gold Coast service running express while the Beenleigh train stops all stations. Let's see what happens at peak times. In the morning peak, services from the Gold Coast to the city run on the outside track in 7-minute intervals. Services from the Beenleigh to the city run on the second track in 7-minute intervals, and everything else runs on the first track, averaging 10 minutes between trains. As the Tennyson service will stop all stations, you cannot route the city-bound Tennyson services through the third track, as this will conflict with the express Gold Coast services, nor can you route it through the second track, as there is simply no room, and even if there was, this would cause huge knock-on effects if there was any sort of delay. If the Tennyson service was bound in the direction of Beenleigh, it would not be able to, as the train frequency is planned such that the Gold Coast and Beenleigh trains have the maximum possible distance between them, and adding another service in there would screw this up, such that the express service would be able to catch up with the Tennyson train. The same thing happens in the afternoon peak, except in reverse. What about off-peak service? Not really. The off-peak utilises tracks 1 and 2, so technically we could route a service through track 3, but the service can only run in one direction, as tracks 1 and 2 are timed perfectly for the Gold Coast train. This solution was suggested by Robert Dow recently. But come on, an infrequent, off-peak, and one-direction-only service is a lackluster excuse of a solution. So this is what Mark Bailey meant when he said reopening the Tennyson line would cause significant delays across the network. The only way to fix this would be to add another track. This would allow the complete separation of the express Gold Coast services from the rest of them, allowing us to add more traditional all-stop services on the other tracks, as well as boost frequency of the Gold Coast services. So can we add another track to this bottleneck corridor? Well, of course not. There is simply no room to add another track. Doing so would mean significant terraforming of the surrounding land, as well as the destruction of people's homes. This makes for a very weird rail corridor on the Beenleigh line, where you have 4 tracks between Beenleigh and Kirby after the completion of the Logan and Gold Coast Faster Rail project, followed by a 3-track alignment to South Brisbane, only to go to 2 tracks over the Merivale Bridge. Speak of bottlenecks, am I right? So that's why we can't reopen the Tennyson line, not to mention the track conflicts at Yeerongpilly or the massive bottleneck that is the Merivale Bridge. It's sad, really. One of the ways we can fix our network is cross-connectivity, and the Tennyson line would provide said cross-connectivity, at least locally. But like a red herring of sorts, the Tennyson line continues to elude us into thinking it's possible, when in reality it really isn't. So those were the histories, remnants, and futures, or lack thereof, of 3 of Brisbane's railway stations. I'm now going to go home in the only way I can, my private automobile. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.